Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Improving Clinical Site Performance. It's all about relationships. My name is Colleen Lezovitz and I'm a Senior Marketing Manager at Worldwide Clinical Trials. Before we kick things off, I did just want to go over a few things. All attendees are on mute, but please use the Q&A window to submit questions at any time pertaining to the presentation because we will be reserving time at the end to answer any questions that come in. This webinar is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an email with a link to access the on-demand afterwards, so keep an eye out for that email most likely tomorrow. Our speakers today are Jeff Zucker, Worldwide's Vice President of Feasibility and Recruitment Optimization, and our guest speaker today is Woody Woodeman, who is the co-founder, co-owner, president, and CEO of Synergy Clinical Research Centers. At this time, I would like to hand things over to Jeff. Jeff?
Thank you, Colleen, and thank you to everybody for taking the time out of the busy schedule to listen to Woody and I banter on a little bit about site relations, and it's really going to be something like that. I want to get away from sort of a formal discussion, a lecture, if you will, and I think the way we're going to treat it is Woody and I are going to have a bit of a discussion. But let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Jeffrey Zucker. I am currently, as Colleen said, the Vice President here of Feasibility and Recruitment Optimization. And I've been in the industry for about 20 years now. I worked in big pharma. I did run some sites. I had my own consulting company, ran a phase 1 unit, and did some of that fun stuff. And before that, I was a psychotherapist. And as far as Woody, I'm really pleased and honored that Woody took the time to be able to talk with me on this webinar. So thank you very much, Woody, and I'd like to hand it over to you for a second to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning. This is Woody Woodeman. My title, I think you all heard, which was far too long. I've worked in the research field now for 25 years, and for the last 20 years, along with Dr. Bari and Ishak and other staff, we started Synergy Clinical Research Centers in San Diego. We've done over 500 studies, predominantly in the area of CNS, mostly in psychiatry, inpatient and outpatient from phase 1 through phase 3. We specialize in schizophrenia and bipolar, Alzheimer's, depression, the kind of norms. We also do some medical studies also. This is my 50th year in working in the psychiatric field in San Diego, and I'm very much looking forward to this. And just to clarify, the two pictures on the screen, I'm actually the younger-looking guy, and Jeff is actually the much older-looking guy.
Yeah, so the beauty of it was my picture was probably taken about 10 years ago. But, yeah, so I don't look that good anymore. So, Colleen, I think we'll move on, and I'll take us to the next slide here. So what we're going to be discussing today, it's not groundbreaking. There's no new technology we're going to be discussing here. Instead, we really want to bring up the forgotten art and benefits of having strong site relationships. I've also received some feedback from some folks saying, this is just common sense stuff. Of course you have to have relationships with sites. The problem really is, and I wouldn't fully disagree with that, but it's not happening to the extent where we can maximize the performance of both the sites and the CROs and the sponsors to really be working together to conduct clinical trials in an efficient way. It needs to be a structured process as well. So we want to provide a little bit of structure around it with our communications with the sites. We have our CRAs going out to the sites very frequently, obviously, and they definitely have a role to do there. But to have another person to serve as a relationship sort of bridge between the site and the sponsor or CRO, I have found to be very efficient in my past work. I served this role for a pharmaceutical company in the past, and I've done it a bit at the CRO level as well, and it really does reap some benefits that we'll talk about in a little bit. So this here is a high-level agenda, and listed are some questions and some points that we would like to cover. So, basically, we'll talk about where we are right now, what is the process for improvement, what are the benefits for everybody. We want to create a win-win situation here when we do this. And how do we communicate? We want to communicate effectively and efficiently. And also from the site perspective, what we want to know as a CRO, I want to know what the site is expecting and asking of us, and what can we do to improve our communication. And really, we're hoping to be able to set the standard, to be able to set the future of site relationships. Woody, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, I mean, I agree with that, and I think a lot of it is just looking at where we are now, and there's some really, really good things, I think, going on, but also looking on how we can improve upon it and maybe learn some lessons from past experiences when the system wasn't so electronic and so distant. Just the difference between the number of people who are working in, I mean, how many people on this call right now are actually calling in from their home office rather than from an office with a lot of other colleagues involved. And so I think it's just looking at all those things and trying to figure out how we can take some lessons from the past and adjust them and create them to work in today's world.
Yep. Great. Okay. Thanks. So, with the evolving push for patient-centric trials, including risk-based monitoring and things like that, which I think are all incredible things that we need to continue doing. But I think that the sites have sort of been a bit forgotten in this process. And we need to continue with these patient-centric activities and patient outreach that we're doing, but we need to balance it a little bit more with some of the increased site engagement that we want to do. Woody, you've been in the industry a long time, like I have. How have you seen, the relationship between the site and, say, the sponsor or even CRO change over the last decade or so?
I think, to be honest with you, I think it's actually better now than it was just a few years ago. And I think there had gotten to be a time where there was very little contact between the pharmas, the CROs, and the sites themselves, other than through the CRAs. And not that that's not important. It'll always be the primary link. But I think one thing that's happened is with the development of more smaller pharmas or biotechs, they have actually reached out more to the sites. And when I say sites, I'm speaking for my site, but I talk to a lot of sites, and we share a lot of information like that. And there's a lot more reaching out from some of these smaller companies, which has really been a very positive thing. And just over the last year, at meetings like NCDO, ASCP, I can't help but still call it NCDO, CNS Summit, meetings like that, the amount of times that CROs and pharmas have arranged for meetings with one site at a time or a number of sites at a time just to discuss and get feedback and get input. And I think those things are happening more and more, and I think they need to happen more and more just because I think for the sites, we want to be more involved and we don't want to control things. We're not that smart sometimes, but I think before the input we can give for operational issues and exclusion criteria issues, and I'd like to see more during the meetings. We have calls sometimes, but I think we've all been on calls that sometimes I feel bad for the CROs and pharmas because the calls tend to be them talking a lot and trying to get sites to talk. 10 times is kind of painful at times. But I think most importantly, and I'm rambling a bit here, but I think this is a really important issue, and that is discussions after the protocols. We'll get calls a lot of times, and they'll ask us for, how did we do in our last study on placebo response? And we'll say, we don't know, because the great majority of times, we don't get information on that. In the older days, sometimes with companies like Lilly as an example, we would have closeout meetings a lot of times. And I realize in today's world, closeout meetings aren't very practical, but I think electronic versions like a webinar or a Skype or something to talk about how the study went, what was the good things, what were the bad things, focus on the content of the success or not, but also focus on the process of how the study worked. Did it work? What worked well? What didn't work? Those are the kind of things from a site's point of view. I think the before, the during, and the after concentration of communication are so very important.
Yeah, I'd agree. I agree with that. And even, as you say, in between trials, not even during a trial, because we want to maintain that relationship at every point. So when we do approach the sites, it's an easy communication that we're having. And through that communication, we really want to help improve, the protocol assessment, the study startup, patient recruitment, and data quality. So to set up some processes for study startup, for an example, is really going to help slick it up quite a bit. So as the sponsor or CRO, I really don't want to go in there and stamp my process on what they are going to do for study startup, and I don't want the site to have just theirs. I want it to be a combined effort where we're having a discussion about the study startup process and how it works best for them. And for protocol assessment, when Woody brought up Lilly, I was with Lilly myself in a role, regional research manager role, that was essentially this, site relationships. And I used to love going to sites and talking to them face-to-face and bringing the protocol and really have a strong assessment of what the protocol reads. We've gone to the thing where we're sending out a lot of surveys and things like that, and if there are any, I know there are sites on the line here. I know sites love filling out those surveys, but for me, I find it much more beneficial when we're doing a real true protocol assessment for a true feasibility and not a site identification, also for site identifications as well, but more so for before, to go out to meet with some key investigators or maybe even just have a phone call and talk about the protocol. And really talk about it in depth, instead of just asking some questions that somebody at the site, we're not sure who, is going to be placing answers in there for us to analyze. The bottom line is we really want to make it easier for sites to want to work with us. I think that, back in the 90s and things like that, 10 or 15 years ago, it was, for lack of a better word, it was fun. I mean, we had a good time doing clinical trials, and we were talking about the conferences that we'll get to in a little bit too, where we really were interacting very well, and we had a good rapport, and there was good discussion between us. And I would leverage the knowledge of the sites because you are the ones conducting the work. We need to get the input from you in order to produce effective protocols that can be implemented. So moving on for a little bit, the site relationship process and how I envision it works and will work. We want to start off, we have somewhat of a relationship with obviously thousands of sites and investigators right now. I think we want to select a couple of them or a number of them that we want to invite to get into a relationship with us. And then we want to have agreement that we both want to have that relationship. And then we want to set up a face-to-face meeting. We want to get a mutual CDA in place so we can share information back and forth. But at that face-to-face meeting, we really want to set up very strongly the lines of communication. So the important factor here is really the CRAs are always going to be the key communication point for the sites, always. But to have this other person to interact in other ways. And in my world, I would like to make this visit with the CRA, so the CRA is fully engaged and integrated into that communication process. We want to make sure that we're bringing the key players from the sites and from the sponsor or CRO. So the key players, obviously, the PI has to be there, and some of the main study coordinators as well have to be there to make sure that we're setting this up properly. And then we want to talk about some topics that may need some immediate attention or things like that. Some of the main pain points that the sites are experiencing at that point, and see, all right, how are we going to figure out how are we going to fix some of these things? And then we start putting the process into place. So we need high-level processes for pre-award input. How are we going to reach out to you as a site to get feedback for you instead of just sending you a survey? For site identification, how are we going to do that for your site? How are we going to work with it? How are you going to become one of our preferred sites, and we want to become one of your preferred CROs? Issue escalation, very important. So we don't, by placing this role in there, by no means do we want to undercut, as I said, the CRA at all, but we want to make it clear during that planning process, how are we going to escalate issues that the site is experiencing, and vice versa. How are we going to escalate issues that the CRO or sponsor is having with the sites? So we want to communicate frequently, but we want to do it with purpose. I say that you want to do it with purpose. Sometimes just to call and say, hey, how are things going? That's not so bad either, just to maintain the relationship. There doesn't always have to be an issue in hand for us to reach out and communicate, or even to make a visit. Many of us in the industry travel quite a bit. I make my way out to San Diego quite a bit, and whenever I do, I try to make it a chance to stop by and see Woody. And as I'm traveling around for meetings, I want to try to set up some visits with sites to see how things are going, even if we're not doing a study with them. And we want to make sure we're collaborating at all levels. And then we get into the execution, where we're going to follow those escalation and communication plans. We're going to identify key points of collaboration. And, in general, this is going to vary from site to site, how many visits we'll have or how many phone calls we'll have. It's going to vary quite a bit, but that will be tailored for each relationship that we have. And also, as Woody was alluding to at conferences, is a key time to be able to get a group of some of the investigators together to talk with each other and have a forum where we can have an open discussion. Everybody can learn from each other, maybe some of the issues that they're having or some of the successes that they're having as well. Now, Woody, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, if this is something that would work for your site or sites in general.
Yeah, I think all of this is incredibly important. The idea of the escalation or de-escalation. Just the other day I got an email and then a call from a guy I would consider a friend I've known for 15 years who's running a study at our site, and there was a problem with some communication with one of our coordinators, and he missed an email, and it was an important email, and the guy emailed me and gave me a call. We chatted. I went and talked with the coordinator, got it straightened out, and took care of it. I think it's important, if you don't have the relationships, you can still make that contact, but I'm not sure it'll be as effective or get done as well. And I think because of that collegial relationship, and I think the collegial is the important part, is that I can call them, they can call me. Over the years, I think texting is becoming a really important thing, just to text occasionally, just say, anything going on, any problems you're having, let me know. So people understand that the CRA and the coordinator relationship, which is always going to be a key conduit to this whole process, needs the support and the availability of somebody from a site like me or anybody else calling, emailing, texting somebody at the CRO, at the pharma, depending on the circumstance, and asking that question or just checking in or making sure, even checking in to seeing, we're struggling a bit here on this. You have some sites that are doing better, anything special that's going on, that ability to share what's working, what's not working, problems, good things. But I think it's the more open it is, the better it works.
Cool. Great. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. There's got to be openness. There has to be real transparency in the communication, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page.
And I worry a bit because when we're talking about this, I can imagine people are going, gee, this is a lot of time, a lot of energy, travel, and I think a lot of it face-to-face is good, and that's where the meetings are particularly effective, because people are going to the meetings and being able to set some time aside, and it doesn't have to be a 3-hour dinner. It can be a 15-minute cup of coffee sitting out on the patio and just talking and clearing out some things or sharing some ideas. And then I think it can be done in other ways. It can be done in webinars. It can be done in Skype and phone calls that are more group effective and get people more involved. I mean, this last week alone, I had 2 calls from pharma and 2 calls from CRO, just asking myself, Dr. Bari, Dr. Semenuk, Dr. Dielgad, other doctors that we work with, for input on something that they're looking at, inclusion-exclusion criteria. How do we think that would affect, the recruitment or with the population that we may specialize in? And we're not looking to change protocols. We're looking to adjust things based on our experience with the population that we can think can help make this trial more successful. We don't want to own it. We don't want to take it over. We want to make it work better, and the more involvement we have, the more ownership we have. If I worked at a CRO and we were helping to write the protocol, I've taken much more ownership of that protocol than one that's just handed to me and say, go do it. From a science point of view, it's the same thing. The more involvement, input, even if the input is taken and not used, whatever, the fact that people are reaching out to us and asking for that input is hugely important and really affects our feelings of involvement in those trials.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree. Thank you. So talking about, wait a minute. That's a repeat. Let's talk about some benefits that some of the key players are going to have, specifically the sponsor, the sites and the CROs. So the sponsor really benefits from an integrated approach that is really going to cause strong synergy between all of the pieces that are working on their clinical trial. So by having that alliance, they have one point really of contact that's really going to be able to communicate effectively with all of them. Now, does that mean that we're removing the pharmaceutical company or the biotech company from the communication pathline? Absolutely not. We don't want to jeopardize any relationships at all that sites have with sponsors or CROs or anything like that. We want to help enhance it where it's possible. And that's why that these relationships need to be very tailored to each situation that we get into. Some we're going to have more influence or, more communication with that's directed towards setting up processes and things like that. And some we won't have too many because the biopharm company may already have a strong relationship with the site, and they're like, we don't want you guys getting involved. And that's fine. That's fine. But when I talk about these site relationships, it's not just for the CROs. Let's call the CROs and the sponsors sort of the same thing here and say, yes, that's what we're interested in. The folks that are writing the protocol and hoping to launch this product, and the sites that are actually conducting the clinical trials. Having that relationship is really key. Anything else, Woody, that you can think on this slide?
Again, I just think that the more input from a site's point of view, I mean, and again, we're not smarter, we're not anything. It's just sometimes, especially I think with the biopharms, you may have a biopharm group that have run a couple of studies as it relates to the drug they have, but there may be a site out there that's run 100 trials with that same indication, and having the ability of getting that kind of input from just the practical operational avenue of this. Again, not trying to change protocols, but learning what's absolutely mandatory, what can't be changed. Is there fluctuation here that this particular item A, from a site's perspective, will affect recruitment negatively 20%? It's required, it's necessary, we all understand that. But that may be the case, but does the BMI need to be 35 or can it be 38, which will help a bit with the recruitment on the other side? So I think it's just sharing information, trying to help out, because we all want to help make and create a study that will get the answers answered, but it'll also do it in a way that allows the recruitment process, the availability of patients who will qualify for that type of study, to have an access to as many as possible by making adjustments if they can be done. Sometimes they can't be done at all, and that's it, and everybody moves on, and you do the best you can. But just being involved in that, I think, offers pharmas and CROs just a lot of operational information that they may not have at their fingertips.
Yeah, and it's a transparency that really gets to me. It's like, all right, we can't do this with that BMI of 38 or whatever, but we have to keep it at 35. All right, now we're going into this eyes wide open, both of us, and we're going to make adjustments to our assessment of how many patients we're going to be able to obtain for this trial based upon that. It's going to affect it in this way. As long as we both know that and we're both aware of it, of how much it's going to affect, and that it will have an effect on it, it's a much better situation than the CRO typically saying, yeah, we can do that, and then ends up not doing it, or the sponsor. Or the
right, and it extends, I think, into one area we haven't spoken too much about, but the whole issue of patient recruitment, and in today's world, how that's changing between, professional referrals, which are still obviously a huge key, but the whole issue of advertising and radio and TV and this and that, and now with social media and electronic and all these different things, centralized recruitment. There's so many avenues, and again, just the experience that sites have and the CROs have and the pharmas have, and being able to transparently share that information and come up with, for this particular study, what do we really think are the, is this going to provide 30%, this is going to be 40, this is going to be 30, whatever it's going to be, so we're all on the same page, and there's the plan. And then when we have the plan, if it works, great. If it doesn't, where do we want to quickly adjust or, just not change, but just adjust things to make them work as functionally as possible?
Yep, agree. So let's talk a little bit about some of the site benefits. And for this one, and I'm going to actually give Woody a little more time, obviously, to talk about this one, but I wanted to explain what I had put up here on the slide. And I'd actually like to start in the upper right-hand corner, where I think one of the greatest benefits that sites get, and I actually think that they enjoy, at least I used to enjoy it when I ran a site and when I used to interact, is there's early engagement with them about protocol design, about clinical development design of a compound and things like that. So giving that advice and that engagement early on helps in a lot of ways. It helps you design the protocol to make it more doable. And it also gives you some great information as to what you should be looking for in a patient, from a patient perspective. It also lets you plan better for upcoming work that you know is coming and what to expect. That's great for a pharma company if you have that relationship with a pharma company as a site. What I used to do at Lilly was I knew what was going to be happening in the next year, and I would meet with my key investigators and go to their office, and we would go through all the studies and say, these look like good ones for you, but these not so much. In a CRO world, it's a little more challenging, but we still have a lot of time. By the time the RFP comes in the door, and between that and the time that we win the award, there's a significant amount of time where we can get a lot of good input. We want to agree upon the process and operating procedures. It's a lot easier to do the work that way when we both know what the expectations are and what we should be doing. And also we can be proactive and optimize startup. So setting up those processes to really get the startup going in a tailored fashion, again, for startup, patient recruitment, and data quality. And Woody, I don't know if you have processes like this set up with other partners or things like that, but it seems like something, and again, no-brainer, yes, let's put some structure to it and really put it to work.
Yeah, I mean, we have process set up with because we've been doing this is our 20th year, and we've worked with a lot of people, and one of the nice things about relationships is it's, with you guys who all live on the farm belt, you can change companies and stay in your same house. So there's a lot of people that we may have originally met with this pharma that are now at this CRO, or this CRO now with this pharma. But and I'll just speak for our site, we love it. And when a pharma or a CRO or somebody we know calls and saying, to the point even we haven't been awarded a study, this or that, or it's a pharma calling, and they're asking for input on a study that may be 6 months, a year, longer away. They're not really even sure, but they're looking for that input. They're just looking for our thoughts and ideas. That to us is an ultimate compliment. And it makes us feel very good. And we tend to be very honest about it. We're very careful about it in the sense that, we have working CDAs with a number of CROs and pharmas, so we can discuss these things. But again, it's very confidential, but we're just from a site point of view, I'm stumbling a bit here, but I can't tell you how much as a site we appreciate that opportunity. It makes us feel very, very good. It makes us feel like we're doing some things right. And it's always nice to be asked to help with people that you have worked with and they feel comfortable enough calling you and asking that. From a site's point of view also, you're happy because you're assuming that if you're being called and asking that, questions and so forth, you have probably a good chance of working on that trial if it seems to fit with, who you are and what you are. And sometimes it'll have nothing to do with an area that we're in, but it's looking at process questions rather than content questions. And you can say, it's not an area we're in, but we've done studies like this before, or here's 2 sites that we know very well who work very strongly in that area. but if you get the feeling and you're told that, you know, if everything works out well and the study takes place and so forth, they'd like you to be involved if you'd want to. It also helps you in preparing, like you know, Jeff has said, starting to go through databases, starting to talk to the doctors in your community who you work with, and starting to talk about, well, here's a study we're doing, you know, a generic study or a regular study that's looking at this population or these special types of patient scenarios, so you can prepare for that. So by the time you hear officially you're selected, or you're having, you know, that startup meeting, or you're doing whatever, your pre-site selection visit, you can say honestly that we've already looked at, you know, over 150 potential patients. We've narrowed that down, and we have a pretty solid number of people, depending, of course, on when the study starts and their diagnosis and their, you know, do they qualify at that moment of the study, maybe a different question. But it allows us to prepare much, much better and get everything in place so when the study starts, you're ready to go. It's not like, oh, it started, okay, we'll try to get somebody in that first month or two. You should be able to get people in very, very quickly in that first week. And I think that's a benefit, again, to everybody. We take a lot of pride. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, of being the first person with somebody in the study, somebody consented, somebody randomized. But it gives us a chance to really focus on what's the most important thing for us, which is really selecting the best and most proper patients for a study, and gives the study the best chance of having the people enter, having the people retained, and finishing the study so the company can get, whether it's good news or bad news, they're getting news that's based on good collection of information from the right populations.
Great, thank you. And then, you know, for the CRO, there's obvious benefits too that are very similar to the sponsor benefits. But we only get better engagement. We want are able to get the sites to want to work with us, higher level probably of responsiveness when we have these communications. I see there's one question that came in, and how do you recommend handling difficult relationships and delays in responses? Well, we want to be proactive with this in setting up these relationships to start with. Now, are we going to be able to set up a relationship like this with every one of our sites? No, we're not going to be able to do that. But for the sites that we do have these relationships with, that's the exact reason why we want to set these up, is to avoid delays in responses. I hate delays in responses, by the way. It's a pet peeve of mine. And to avoid those difficult relationships. So when I'm looking at the spectrum of sites that we're going to evaluate for potential to build this relationship with, I may pick a difficult site. I probably will pick a difficult site because but unfortunately at this point it's more reactive. What I want to do is be more proactive, set up that relationship, set the expectations, and to make sure. And, you know, we can disagree and we can argue or whatever, but we have those processes in place where we're going to communicate. 90% of all this stuff really is communication and getting it down. So the more we can communicate, I think the more we're going to be able to avoid the situations where we have difficult relationships. So we obviously have an expanded consultation network that we can work with to help us with protocols development, again, leading to the faster startup with our processes, better patient recruitment. So everybody does patient recruitment a little bit differently. You know, is there a large media campaign? I know some sites like those, some sites hate those. Some sites just say, give me this amount of money and I'll do what I need to do. All of that should be tailored for each site relationship that we have. So when we engage Woody, I know for recruitment and for startup, this is going to be the startup time. This is going to be what he's going to need for patient recruitment. And here's the quality that I expect from that, and the patient recruitment as well. So we get a better commitment when we have a good relationship. I mean, it's almost borderline friendship type of thing where we're helping each other out, and that's really what it is. We're helping each other out because we all have the same goal in mind, and that's to execute the trial, quite frankly, as quickly and as efficiently as possible with the highest amount of quality. So the CRO has quite a few benefits with this. In conjunction with that, you know, with these relationships, we also, and I don't want to separate these out where it's like, you know, there are three separate bubbles, if you will, the site, the CRO, and the sponsor. the CRO and the sponsor work very closely together in interacting with the sites. We want to do that. At any given time, it's always more beneficial in my eyes to bring someone from the sponsor with me to set up some of these relationships and maintain when we can, possibly during a trial and things like that. I think it's very powerful, as Woody had mentioned a little bit earlier. So what we can do in addition for these site relationships is in between studies, where there are no real issues or anything like that, maintain the relationship with them and keep it going and keep it live so when the next opportunity goes, we can hit it up right away. I'm looking at some of the questions, and I know we're going to have time for questions at the end. Sorry, I skipped ahead there. But there was one question that I could jump into now that sort of fits the bill. So someone asked about the hybrid KOL and pre-study monitoring visit and things like that. So the way this differs a little bit is I'm not necessarily going to be, and when I say KOLs, I'm talking about thought leaders and at academic institutions and things like that. Those aren't really going to be my main targets. My main targets are going to be research centers that see a lot of patients and do a lot of research. Not that academic institutions do not, but I want to reach out to the folks who actually really are conducting the trials. So there's a clinical part of it that I want to get protocol feedback on from a clinical, but I also want to get strong operational. And then I also want to make sure that, like when I interact with Woody, I know something's going to get done. At an academic institution with the KOL, sometimes it can be a bit of a bureaucracy, if you will. So I want to be able to slick things up and make communication as strong as possible. And I want to do it with the large research centers or even the smaller research centers or the networks for that matter as well. I want to be reaching out to some networks to be able to leverage a lot of that information. There's a lot of possibility there. So with that, how do we engage these physicians? Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways we can get engaged these physicians. Here at Worldwide Clinical Trials, not putting a plug in, but we do our fair amount of articles. We're really a medically driven CRO, so we write a lot of articles. We really do help write protocols a lot here, and I've been at a couple of other CROs by far. Worldwide works with the biotech companies and things like that who they're a company of two people, and they have a compound. That's their baby. So we work with them in helping the marketing strategy and the clinical strategy and writing the protocol and all that. So we can engage investigators at that point for some interactions and write some articles together. We can go through the associations, specifically ACRP. Let's get some new investigators into the pool, some physicians who aren't really up to their knowledge isn't there yet. Let's engage ACRP to really work with them and get them up to snuff, working with the advocacy groups and support groups, and of course, as we mentioned, the conferences down here below. And this obviously is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure Woody, which one of the conferences that you attend do you think it probably is the most fruitful and why?
It's a really good question. The ones that I actually enjoy the most, and again, I should explain, I'm not a doc, I'm not a scientist, but the ones I actually enjoy the most are interesting. It's really the CNS Summit, which is usually in October, and I enjoy it because it's small. It's 400 to 500, and yet everybody's kind of in the same place at the same time. So there's a lot of intermingling. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of discussing. From people like me to people that are obviously much smarter and much more involved in protocol design and process. But the opportunity to talk with people like that in a place like the CNS Summit has been very helpful. I feel the same way about ISCTM, which is even a smaller meeting and much more scientific. But I really like attending it because, again, I'm learning. I'm learning what the process is. I'm starting to create or continue to work with relationships with people that I've known for a year, or some people I've known for 15 or 20 years. But the opportunity, it's like going to startup meetings. We've always kind of laughed that the most important place in a startup meeting is the lobby bar. And not so much because of the drinking aspect, because I learn a lot more sometimes in startup meetings, no offense to startup meetings, but sitting in the lobby at 9:30 at night, with a beer or a cup of coffee and talking with staff or talking with other sites about What do you think so far? How is it going? That kind of interaction, I think, is incredibly important. The other meeting which I really enjoy, and it's very much specific, is the International Congress on Schizophrenia, which is every 2 years. And obviously, we have a big focus on schizophrenia, and it's very important for us. But again, it's very much more of a scientific meeting. There's no exhibit halls or this or that, but just the chance to talk to people from around the world, literally, at that meeting about schizophrenia, what they're doing, what they're working on, things we may have worked on and didn't even know it 10 years ago, or what they're looking to work on in 5 years, again, is very helpful. And again, as far as the relationship building, I think really, really important.
Great, yeah. And obviously the big ones like DIA and even the more therapeutically driven ones that are really large, they're great venues as well. But as we all know, with those conferences, there's a lot going on. And to be able to set some time apart to really have a chat, like you say, Woody, a beer or a coffee or something like that, just to touch base with people. It's a really great forum to be able to do that, and I try to do that as much as possible.
And let me mention again, I think I said earlier, but too, the other thing I think, and it started to happen over the last couple of years, is a number of CROs, a number of pharmas have used those meetings, NCDO, ASCP, also as a place to really get together and sit down and have a 20-minute meeting in somewhere off, so you have a chance to really talk about what's worked, what hasn't, any concerns, good things, bad things. Me obviously trying to show as many pictures of my 2 grandsons as humanly possible, but just again, that opportunity. And I think the more we have more risk-based monitoring, the more we have everything going so much more electronic, that makes these opportunities to get together and chat and share information much, much better. And it opens up a lot of avenues to share information with people that you may know their name, but until you sit down and chat with them for a minute, you feel much more comfortable in emailing them, texting them, or calling them just to chat about something that you may have mutual interest in.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Let me move on. This is actually my final slide. Then we can get some questions. Basically, in summary, you do want to make some face-to-face time, especially initially. We need to make that face-to-face time. It's essential. So whether it's at a conference, but preferably I want to go to the site. I want to go visit the site. So following this webinar, and this is something that we're starting to pick up at Worldwide. I am starting to pick up at Worldwide right now. I will be making some visits to sites and networks and things like that, and I look forward to seeing some of the sites that are on the call right now. But I want to have that face time to start with them, and I want to talk with them often. I don't want to bug them, but I want to make sure that they know that I'm here for them as Worldwide. We're here for them. So we want to check up even in between trials and things like that. Excuse me. As Woody had alluded to before, he doesn't really see it as bugging them, but that he likes to hear from the sponsors and the CROs. So, and I think that's a good thing. When I was at a site, I felt the same way. I really liked it when they came out and visited, and I think it shows a level of commitment that we're all in this together. We know that you're in the trenches at the sites, but we want to make sure that we're here to support you in any way possible. Maybe talk about, in your setting of expectations, really, are there some goals that we want to set for each other specifically, and we want to have very open and honest discussions about how we're going to enroll a study when it gets down to a study level discussion, how many patients we're going to get, and things like that. And basically, at the end of the day, we want to make it easier for sites to conduct clinical trials. There's been a lot of talk about how complex protocols have become, and that's very true. But the fact of the matter is we still have to conduct these trials. So we want to help you in making that easier to conduct the trials, even with the increased complexity. And in the end, everybody wins. I really feel like this. I did this in my past when I was at Eli Lilly, like I had said, and it was very successful. And at Lilly at the time, around 2004, they actually eliminated the position. And I believe 2 years later they brought the job back because there was a significant drop in patient recruitment and relationships and things like that. So this can really be a pivotal piece to help maintain the relationship with the sites, improve the probability of success for the clinical trial, and also just add more investigators into the pool and get some good studies done. And that's really all I have. But Woody, I'll allow you some time to wrap up as well.
No, I think you said it, and in looking at some of the questions, I think getting into those will be very helpful, because I just think, again, I'm sure people are saying, everybody knows this, everybody knows this. Everybody knows it, but we historically, especially over 4 or 5 years ago, we weren't doing it much. I think we're doing it more now, and I think there's that trend to do it more, but I think it's something that does take time, it does cost money, for you guys as far as the travel and so forth. I'd actually suggest also that when you have a relationship and sites are at a meeting or something and they have an opportunity to go visit the CRO or the pharmas. I don't know how CROs or pharmas feel about that, but I've done that from time to time, and I find it very refreshing, and I think at first it was almost like, why are you wanting to come here? And it's like, because it's kind of like, you come to our house, I'd like to go to your house, just to get a feel for how you guys do and what you do, and everything that goes into place, I think is helpful. So I just think the more important time we spend together and try to do it as good as possible and as well done as possible without interfering or costing fortunes. And that's the last thing I want to add to this is this issue about kind of scorecards and getting more information to the sites about how they did on a study, what their placebo responses were, a closeout visit, if you will, online, so we can all talk about that. I remember going to those years ago, and they were incredibly helpful. The study was over, but what we learned in those meetings about what worked, didn't work, because we will think as a site certain things worked, and then we'll learn that when you look at the overall study, that really didn't have a significant advantage. So the more we can learn about what we've done will help us do what we need to do better in the future.
Thank you. So that was really our talk, and I hope you guys found it at least enjoyable. But do we want to go to the question and answers now?
Sure. So we have a lot of great questions coming in. We do have a little less than 10 minutes left, so if we don't get to answer your question, we will reach out to you individually. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into a few of the questions now. Woody, this one is directed towards you. The question is, more and more sponsors want to replace a F-to-F investigator meeting with a WebEx one. I'm never in favor because I believe the face-to-face is more engaging. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, I realize that the cost and everything else involved is huge, but I think it's actually more important now for some of the reasons we talked about because of the risk-based monitoring and more people being home-based and all these different things. I think there's even less opportunities, and I know it's been a tough time just at meetings. There seems to be less pharma and sometimes CRO people at some of these meetings just because I know travel is being cut or, watched more carefully. But I do think that the more we can do these face-to-face, I think it gives that opportunity to start out on the right foot as far as creating those relationships, a chance to meet people who you'll be talking with or receiving emails from. And that face-to-face, I think, gives a much better opportunity for the successful communication during the trial.
Great. Another question that's come in asks, there's plenty of evidence that the pressure for enrollment leads to poor quality of data and failed studies. The person asking is asking if the two of you could spend some time talking about this common error that occurs from the site and or the CRO perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I can make a quick comment about that from the CRO perspective, and I think that this is something that the industry needs to work on is, sites start enrolling, and then the CRA may not make it out there for a couple of weeks after that, and, there has to be a standard put into place, and, the monitoring plan usually there is, but with resources for CRAs, as we all know, particularly in the United States, being at a premium right now, it's tough. But we have to get out earlier. We have to get the CRAs out earlier. or we have to take the approach of every site can enroll this many patients, and then they have to have a CRA visit before they continue to enroll more patients. So I agree with your comment that it does run into some difficulties there. But I think that in setting up, with these relationships and things like that, I think that we're going to find some better quality results. But in general, for all of the sites, I think that we need to get the CRAs out there earlier, and we also need to control enrollment. We have to control enrollment for a number of reasons, and not just for that, but like drug supply and things like that. I've conducted trials where we've enrolled so quickly that we've run out of IP. So there are issues there. So we have to be able to make it a steady but strong enrollment, and we have to get the CRAs. Woody, I'm not sure how you feel.
No, I agree, and I think again it's another star on the issue of early involvement with the sites, getting information, because it gives us an opportunity to start doing early pre-screening and so forth. But I agree with you. We've done a number of studies over the last year now where there was like once you got to 5 patients, then you stopped, and at that point, there was they came out and there was almost like a little mini audit. It really wasn't an audit, but it was an opportunity to go through all 5 charts, look at this, and as a site, when you first heard it, you were going, I don't know, but it's really turned out, I think, to be a very, very good idea in the sense of, I guess it's the rabbit and the hare thing again, but it also, it's like the old deal, you never want to buy a brand new car in its first year because of this issue or that issue. And I think on a study, the availability to do 2 patients, 5, whatever it may be, and then kind of stop and say, okay, let's look at how this went. How did we do? How did the support do? Were the supplies there? We discovered something. They discovered something in the process that needs to be amended or changed, whatever it may be. I think it's a very good thing, because if you look at, and the question was more related as the study goes on, there's more pressure, and I think that's true. But I think also sometimes sites and everybody is excited about getting off to this fast start, which is great. But to me, the key issue is not how many you put in, but how many don't screen fail and the retention rates. And so I think doing that more of a controlled approach sometimes can be very beneficial to that.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Do we need a different approach of communication/strategy in dealing with consortium versus independent/individual institution/CRO? Some consortium have their own processes that delay milestone or prevent initial communication.
Yeah, so, ideally when you think of a consortium of sites, and I think that's what this person is referring to, on paper, it sounds fantastic. I have these 20 sites, and all you have to do is one contract and one budget and things like that. And if I'm wrong, please you can type in something else. But it's the challenge that we want to make sure that the quality, I'm more interested in the quality. I mean, we can get things going maybe up and quickly, but I want to make sure that one site is delivering as well or better as the other site. They're all delivering the same. We all want them to be delivering at the same quality. So the old SMO model was, 2 docs that were very successful got together and said, hey, let's form a consortium here where we can, advertise together and we can really build up our businesses. And then they're doing well for a couple of years, and then they add some other guy who maybe not be so good. And then the quality goes. And then all it takes is one study from that consortium, and we all know people. We have long memories here when we get burned from a site or from a consortium, things like that. So we want to make sure we're vetting these sites. We're working with the consortium on some level, but we have to evaluate the sites very individually. Each one of those sites is a different relationship.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I agree with that, and I think the consortiums I think that can work really well are ones that may have, in order to get involved with the study and those kind of things. But I think that the PI is and needs to be the leader of that particular site and needs to be an independent functioning person who doesn't need to function within certain guidelines as it relates to the study and the doing of the study at that site. That you shouldn't need to add a layer. That person needs to be the person you go through either way to get information or to give information.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Woody.
Sure.
With that, we're going to wrap things up. Like I mentioned, if you did submit a question that we did not get to, we will reach out to you individually. I want to thank Jeff and Woody for being our speakers for today's webinar, and I want to thank everyone for joining. If you're interested in learning more about Worldwide Clinical Trials, we invite you to visit worldwide.com. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Take care.